The power of a Maori prayer coming from the heart. Soon after I returned home from Australia, the spiritual leader of the Watahi Maori, the indigenous people of New Zealand, asked me for permission to come to my home in America and talk with me. Maki Ruka made this request through Mary Thunder, a Native American elder who called me and drove him to my home. This was pretty interesting, since I had no contact with these people, but there was no way I was going to turn him down, even though I had no idea why he wanted to talk with me. Mary Thunder brought Maki Ruka to my home, along with several of his assistants. Mary is a wonderful grandmother of the Cheyenne tribe, and we have remained friends ever since. Maki Ruka was an impressive man weighing about 350 pounds. He brought several young men from his tribe with him to carry all the sacred ceremonial items he felt were necessary for his visit with me. Some of these items weighed over 100 pounds. I can't remember exactly what they were, except they were heavy, as it sometimes took more than one person to move them. The ceremonial articles were placed all around us as we began to speak. Our conversation soon led into a discussion about the survival of the world and how we, members of modern civilization, needed to remember the old wisdom to survive. He said clearly that there were forms of communication that, if remembered, would change everything in the world. For some reason, it was clear that this was his primary message. We talked for about 4 hours about many subjects, but before he left, he told me that he was going to send someone from his tribe to me and for me to wait for this person. I didn't understand why he was doing this either, but I agreed. A few years later, I was living with my family in Arizona, and we were in the middle of a move from Sedona to Cave Creek. I had rented a moving van and was struggling to lift a box into the van. You would not believe how much stuff I had acquired once I was married. When we met, Claudette had a house full of everything necessary for life, and so did I. As I was slowly trudging back and forth between our home and the van, moving more and more stuff out of the house and loading it up, a young man I had never seen before walked up to me. "Hi," he greeted me. "Do you need help loading your truck?" He was about 28 years old and spoke with a perfect Californian accent. He wore old blue jeans and a clean white t-shirt and a big smile. As a matter of fact, he could have been one of my neighbors back when I lived in California as a child and young adult. I told him no, that's okay. I don't have too much left. Actually, I really did need his help, but I didn't want to impose upon his friendliness. He looked me straight in the eyes and from his heart gently insisted, "Really, I have nothing to do and I would enjoy helping you. How could I refuse?" So we began work. He didn't have much to say, but seemed to simply focus on the work and do it. And so, in near silence, we worked together. When the truck was fully packed, I thanked him and asked if there was anything I could do for him. He said, "No, but I really would like to help you unload your truck at your new home. Is that okay?" I couldn't believe such generosity. "No, that's too much to ask, but thank you for everything you've done." And again, he looked into my eyes and said, "Please, let me help you. You need my help, and I have absolutely nothing else to do. Really, it's okay." Somehow, I began to feel like I knew him from somewhere. He felt like a brother in my heen, and so I surrendered to his plea. "Okay, jump in, but you're crazy." I was 2.5-hour drive to our new home. So there was ample opportunity to ask him many questions about himself. When he'd helped me load, he'd said almost nothing about himself, but now he was held captive in this old rented truck. We were barely outside Sedona when I asked where he was from. I expected him to answer California, but instead he said, "From New Zealand." No further explanation. I looked at him, surprised. "I thought you were from California. Did you live there for a while?" Without looking at me, he replied, "No, this is my first time I've ever been to America. I arrived about 2 weeks ago." Immediately, I turned to him and inquired, "Well, where did you learn to speak English with a Californian accent so perfectly?" His reply shook me to my bones. "Oh, I just learned it about 3 weeks ago. My tribe taught me." My curiosity jumped into awareness. "What? You learned perfect English in less than a month?" "Yes, it was easy." Then, before I could rebound from this incredible statement, he said, "Do you remember Maki Ruka? He sent me to you." I had almost completely forgotten Maki Ruka's promise to send someone to me, so this caught me completely off guard. I couldn't even say, "You're kidding me," and that would have been ridiculous anyway. No one could come up with those words about having been sent by Maki Ruka unless they were true. No one knew except me. Instantly, I realized that I was in the midst of a deeply spiritual experience. The energy in my body changed. I turned to him and asked, "How did you find me?" His reply was so obvious. "Easy. I followed my heart." After a pause, he continued, "Actually, I first had to go to the Hopi. I was instructed that my tribe and the Hopi were to share prophecies, and I was elected to go to them. Afterwards, I was told to find you. I went straight to the Hopi. Can I tell you what happened there?" As if I was going to stop him, he told me a story that few would believe, but I tell you, this is exactly what he said. He adjusted himself in the seat of the old truck and turned slightly towards me. "I arrived at Third Mesa late at night, but they, the Hopi, somehow knew I was coming, and a place for me to stay was prepared. The next day, they took me into one of their kivas and kept me there for 3 days and nights. We were in complete darkness. To convey simple requests, they spoke Spanish, which I also know, but mostly they spoke to me in visions and images, revealing their prophecies. I related back to them our truths about what the future will hold. Then, on the third night, they handed me an old clay pot and asked me what I felt about it. Really, at first, it meant nothing to me. But after holding it for a few hours, a wave of knowing came over me, and a tremendous vision followed. I could see that I used to be Hopi hundreds of years ago, and that I was the person who had made this pot. I also remembered that I had placed an image into the pot for myself to remember hundreds of years in the future. In this vision, I remembered everything about myself and my life living with the Hopi. It was so satisfying and so amazing to remember everything. I also instantly remembered how to speak the Hopi language. From that moment on, we only spoke Hopi. That was 3 days ago. What can you say to something like that? After a pause, I asked, "Could you tell me what was shared in the prophecies?" He looked at me like he really wanted to, but he answered, "I'm sorry, but I'm not allowed to talk about the prophecies with anyone." And so the conversation drifted to his ordinary experiences in the States since his arrival. He thought this was an unusual place to live. He felt we were too far removed from nature and reality, and TV he considered to be mind masturbation. Soon we arrived at our destination and pulled the truck to a stop in our new driveway. Again, he spoke little and worked hard as we unloaded our things. When we were finished, he asked permission to perform a ceremony on the new land before we returned to Sedona. In time, this ceremony turned out to be a grand lesson in the power of prayer, especially when this prayer comes from the heart. The land we had purchased was of a near-perfect pentagon shape. My Maori friend asked if he could pray at each of the 5 points, and of course I gave him permission. Together we went to each of the points and prayed with deep reverence. Beloved Creator, please hear my prayer for my friend Drunvalo. He continued asking that all the animals would find refuge on this land, that everyone who lived here would be healthy, happy, and never get hurt. And finally, that no one would ever take this land from me. There was more in his words, but this was the essence. Soon afterwards, we returned to Sedona, where he gave me a big hug, looked in my eyes for one last time, and left. I never saw him again. When we moved into our new home, my wife and I noticed that animals were sleeping all over our land. We only had 1 acre and about half of that was walled in for the house. But as little room as there was, animals who normally would not be near one another, such as deer, javelinas, and coyotes, slept in close proximity. In fact, coyotes usually sleep inside the earth, but not here. They would sleep only a few feet from each other. We often laughed about the Maori prayer that I brought so many different kinds of animals to us. And even though there were vast numbers of scorpions, rattlesnakes, and Gila monsters all over our land, no one was ever bitten or hurt. After about 3.5 years, we decided to move to another home. Our house was located in an extremely popular area, and the realtor had utmost confidence that our house would sell in 2 weeks, and definitely within 30 days. But after almost a year, and hundreds of prospective buyers, we still had not sold our beautiful house. We didn't know what to do. One night, Claudette woke up out of a dream and said, "Drunvalo, remember what the Maori said, that no one would take our property. We must break this prayer or our home will never be sold." The next day, together, we went to each of the 5 points on the land and prayed to change the Maori's words. Our house sold 5 days later.